Reporters for Vice News travel the world, putting a human face to the world's most important stories. But now, we introduce you to them.
This position is now under direct fire.
Go, go, go!
This is Field Notes, a show that sits down with our reporters to find out the stories behind their stories and how they got so close to the action.
This is another example of Lebanese people taking matters into their own hands. American journalists!
American journalists!
In this episode, we hear from the team that was in Gainesville, Florida, while the city debated whether or not to retire their police K-9 unit for good.
Go, go! To the dog or instigate? Go. Good.
So instead of the toy, you're now the toy.
I'm the toy.
I don't want to be the toy. We're at Southern K-9, a dog training facility where people from all over the world come to buy dogs and learn how to handle them in the field. Most of the dogs being trained here are for police departments. There are 50,000 dogs working with cops in America today. Many of them are used for searching or rooting out contraband. But a lot of them are used to chase down and apprehend suspects as part of specialized K-9 units.
He is tearing that man up.
And while they haven't gotten nearly as much attention as other weapons in the hands of police, they can cause just as much damage.
Thank you three for joining me, Alzo, Alex, Gabby. I want to talk about your K-9 piece that was recently reported on Vice News tonight. How did you come up with this pitch?
I came across the story of police canines as being this sort of underreported element of police brutality and something we don't really think about as a tool for terrorizing, communities of color. We pitched this story at around the same time as the Tyree Nichols murder. It sort of felt a little bit irrelevant at that time because it seems smaller scale. But as we actually got into the story, we realized that the terror that these dogs have on these communities is actually extremely vast and very, very scary.
Yeah, I was surprised by the statistics. It was like 3,000 people a year or something get bit or sent to the hospital by K-9 police dogs. What were some of the other shocking findings that you found in your reporting?
I think one of the interesting things that we found was a lot of these police K-9 units throughout the country belong to these sort of smaller units that were attached to police departments. And because of their status as separate units or an elite force within these police departments that can exist from city police departments, county police departments, states all have dogs, they sort of went underreported in the sense of all of their activities. And so if somebody were analyzing a normal police department, the statistics of a police dog may not necessarily come up in terms of levels of abuse or discriminatory actions that they were being deployed for. Much like other special police units, where the country's taking a look at sort of what their role is, and that's what we decided to do with the police canines.
Yeah, are K-9 bites considered excessive force, or are they counted under excessive force reports?
Well, I think according to most K-9 officers, human officers would say, it's force used when necessary. But when necessary, I would say is in quotes because it's kind of like when they tell you to stop resisting in order to justify the force that they're using. And it's the same thing with K-9.
And that was one of the things that the police officers that sicked the dog on the main character in our piece used to say he was resisting arrest. You see it in the body cam footage that Terrell was not resisting. He was on the ground and he was actually throwing his hands up trying to say, your dog got me, please pull him off.
But even
Right.
if he was,
Right.
because even we went to a training facility where they train dogs for police use and law enforcement, government. And he was saying that, if the person resists, that just makes the dog more aggressive. But it's instinctual.
Right.
It's like, okay, even if you probably should stay still when a bee is buzzing around your face, your instinct is to, to try to avoid it, get it off you. And the same with if a dog has his teeth in me,
What are you gonna do?
I'm trying to get the dog off.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you stop moving, the dog will let go. I don't know if I trust that.
And the dog also can't arrest you. So I'm not resisting arrest from this animal because the dog actually cannot physically put me in handcuffs. So I'm curious as to like, what was their reasoning of when it escalates to that point where like an officer can no longer arrest you. We have to now put this dog out to do our job for us.
The line is actually really blurry, and that was something we sort of found in the research, was that varies based on where you're located. So each police department, because there's no national legislation that says how and when police dogs can be used, there's nothing at the federal level to tell police officers, unlike some firearms, other weapons that they have. That can vary depending on what small municipal county you're in to the state level. And so that use of like excessive force isn't applicable across the board. And so, for example, in Gainesville, that person, there had to be a known felony, which was the case in our story, which why the police was deployed, but that's not the case everywhere. So it can be really tedious to find out what is and is not considered excessive force in a lot of these cases, and that's one of the reasons that they're not necessarily prosecuted that often.
Yeah, why did you all decide to focus on the Gainesville Police Department?
Gainesville just felt like a great microcosm to focus on when it comes to this wider debate that's happening in police departments across the country. And Gainesville specifically was an interesting case because they're having this debate in response to what happened to Terrell Bradley in losing an eye. And so we focused on that, as sort of an example of this wider national debate.
I was laying still as a slab of meat on the ground. All they saying is stop moving, stop resisting.
And you not moving nor resisting.
Not moving nor resisting.
And they had to pry the dog off you.
Mm-hmm.
What did they tell you the reason was for them sicking the dog on you?
They ain't tell me no reason. It's just always been, if they gotta call their dogs, they ain't putting them up till they get them a bite. Yeah. That's just Gainesville. When it was fresh, like when it first happened, I used to like wake up in the middle of the night, like just shaking. I just jump up like thinking something on me.
How did it change you?
How have it changed me? And obviously I got one eye, so that changed everything.
Do you think the K-9 unit here should be disbanded?
I feel like it really ain't no need for the dogs now, because I feel like just officers around here, they have the wrong motives with the dogs. When they hear my case, I at least want people to know, like, okay, they did get held to, accountable for what they did.
Do you think there's a reason why some of these cases don't go national? Is because he didn't die from the police dog bite, or like why are some of these cases so unheard of, even though, like you said, they're very common?
I think it's just indicative of kind of excessive force cases across the country. First of all, people love dogs. You know what I'm saying? And so the likelihood of you getting national press around a dog being excessive is slim to none compared to a human being. Because even in the piece, we speak about them dressing up these dogs for Halloween and holidays, and they're in parades. Oh, they're so cute. And so I don't know if you'd get much momentum nationally if more of these cases were brought to light.
Yeah, I remember cops coming to our elementary school with the dog and teaching the kids what it does and that kind of stuff. You're right. It's kind of this like double life that the dog lives, being its cute dog self, but then turning into what we saw in the piece at that training facility. What was it like being there and kind of seeing that in action?
Man, they asked me if I wanted to get in the suit. It was bad enough to see like the reality of a black man getting a dog sicked on him. So the idea of me getting in a suit to do it, no. You just see the saliva dripping from the fangs of the dog, and the dog is just intent upon attacking whatever it was that the trainer had identified the dog to attack. And it was pretty violent.
One of the points that the trainers like to make was that they initially trained the dogs with toys, and so they're trained to attack the toy, and they would say the dog considers it a game. And therefore, the dog's not actually being violent because they're attacking a toy, and then we just swap out that toy for an arm at some point. And that was one of the main arguments that the police had, is, well, the dogs aren't necessarily attacking them, they're just playing with them. But that's a tough argument to make to somebody who's just lost an eye or a limb.
And also, how do they know?
They don't, and that was...
How do you know that the dog went from playtime to vicious time if
So playtime or
the
not.
result is the same, right?
Exactly.
And you mentioned just kind of the image of seeing like a black man bitten with a dog, and something I really appreciated about your piece was connecting it to the Jim Crow civil rights era and talking about the history of dogs being sicked on black people. What was that kind of decision to put that really crucial context in there?
It's history. You got a German Shepherd, and you have a black person. Slave patrols, same thing. Bull Connor, Jim Crow, same thing. 2023, same thing. And so one would be remiss if you didn't explore the relationship between now and what's happened in the past when it comes to dogs and black folks. Is it possible for dogs to be racist? The handler is in control of the dog. So if the handler is racist,
There it is. Then it's possible.
do you think police departments should be training dogs to attack human beings?
I do not. I think that is both an animal rights concern and a human rights concern. We should not be training these creatures to be violent and to be dangerous toward other living beings, in this case, humans. And I just think that we need to stop thinking that these dogs are Lassie.
Police departments will prop them up and dress them up in Halloween costumes, make them look cute. And
Absolutely. And that's okay, you know, but we have to understand that that's propaganda.
I want to talk about how you kind of doorstopped the police chief. What was it like when he, and especially when we're talking about race, right? Because we're seeing now a bunch of these police departments are led by black people. So what was it like to try to get access to this black police chief to talk about this issue? And what was the moment like when he canceled the interview?
Yeah, we had been working on trying to get the police chief to sit down with us for many months before we even left for Gainesville. And we couldn't even get, you know, an email back from them. They kept using the excuse, we're not really sure what's going to happen with the K-9 department, so we're not willing to talk about it. And we sort of talked about maybe just popping in and seeing if the police chief might have some time later on in the week. And luckily, we managed to get through to his assistant, who was like, oh yeah, he can sit down with you. You know, I think not really understanding the context of why we were there. And on the drive back to interview with the police chief, he canceled. And he said that he didn't have time, so we decided we'd go to where he was in the commission meeting to see if he might have a few minutes while they're in recess to talk to us very quickly about the K-9 issue. But clearly, as you see in the piece, he was like unwilling to even entertain the idea.
We are going to take a short recess until 3:20, and we will come back and get after the afternoon business.
How you doing? My name is Alzo Slade. I'm with Vice News. I was looking forward to our meeting yesterday, but you had to cancel. I was wondering if you had a few minutes to chat with me really quick.
Not right now. Not right now, no.
It's important. It's about police dogs.
Not right now.
So when would you be able to chat with me?
We really wanted to show, like, you know, why police officers are holding on to these units so tightly. And we wanted that perspective to be from them so that they could say, you know, we fear for our safety, or, you know, we don't want to have to use our gun. But they wouldn't even give us, you know.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the answers, if I didn't have the answers, I wouldn't sit down with y'all either.
I think we found the police chief in a very complicated time, which was there was a very gray area, not a black and white here, which was one part of the community wanted to eliminate the police dogs completely. Another part of the community, which I think a lot of the people we spoke to fell into this category, which was they didn't want to eliminate it completely. They believed that dogs should be used for searching and sniffing and drugs, but they didn't want the dogs to bite anymore. And then there was the, you know, we need full K-9 units because we need them to chase down and bite suspects. And he was navigating sort of opinions from all of that entire spectrum and hadn't really made a decision at that time. And what they've fallen on since the story aired was that they would be able to deploy police dogs at his discretion. So every time they were going to do it, the police chief would have to say yes or no based off this exact situation. So
They'd have to like call him in the moment.
They would have to call him in the moment,
Wow.
and that's what they sort of settled on to the date of air.
I tell you what was funny though is there's a police officer who serves as security at city council meetings, and we had been in the meeting kind of from the beginning and listening to people go up and speak to the council, and then recess is when we approached them, as you see in the piece. The police security officer, he just, you can see him in the background. As I'm talking to the chief, he's getting closer and closer as if we're a threat. I'm like, bro.
With the cameras rolling.
I'm like, relax. Like, I'm not trying to jump the chief of police.
Yeah.
in the
But they
city
are
council
so
meeting.
just very, very defensive when it comes to journalists, especially now. And it seems like if we're in this moment where everybody's talking about police and police reform and blah, 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 we would hope that they would be just more open to share some of the position that this kind of moment has put them in.
Yeah.
What if there's like a national survey about how people feel about police dogs? I think it would be generally on the like pro side just because of how we prop them up. I'm from Pittsburgh, and I remember this story. It was in 2014. A police K-9 was sent on this man, and he stabbed the dog, at a self-defense, which he claimed. And not only, the dog ended up dying, not only did they like shut the city down to have this parade of funeral for this police dog, they sentenced him to like 17 years or something like that. I think he might have injured a cop or something, also resistant, 17 years for killing the police dog. And it's like you said, what are you supposed to do if it's biting me?
Yeah.
And I think my life could be at risk. That's pretty insane.
I think that's the paradox, because in many ways they treat a police dog like a human police officer. So when the police dog retires, they retire them with, honors and,
benefits for the
ceremony.
pups.
Yeah. All of, right. And then if a dog is injured or killed in the field by a suspect, if you will, then they get punished, pretty much as if they killed a human officer. Who should be held accountable when a police dog injures or kills a citizen? Because the handler can say, well, it wasn't me, it was the dog. But the dog is not gonna be put on trial.
Right.
The dog is not gonna serve time, right? So it's used as a scapegoat.
If you're going to put a police dog in front of a jury of 10 people, they tend to go with the dog. They tend to side with, in general, police officers, and they tend to side with the dogs. And so, the actual number of excessive force cases that are successful are very low for that exact reason. And because the rules of what constitutes excessive force change so drastically, you may consider what happened to Terrell Bradley an excessive force case, but the Gainesville Police Department came out and said that no, actually protocol was followed. So a case like that, while it is in court, would be really difficult to prosecute, was the point that they were making.
I mean, we're just having these conversations all the time about like police reform. And first it's like, we pass new policies, and then sometimes like Memphis, their city is passing legislation, or the state will take over, or there's a consent decree. But like at this point, as long as you all have been kind of covering this police issue, especially since 2020, seeing text messages like that, like, do you think police reform is actually possible? Is that a culture that can be fixed if they're laughing and making fun of a guy who just got his eye bit out by a K-9?
Something I found really interesting, one of the persons that we interviewed was a black former police officer of Gainesville's K-9 unit. And he told us when we asked, is there a way to sort of fix this unit? Speaking nationally, he said obviously that this is a very difficult task, but in a small department like Gainesville's, we're talking a couple hundred people, that's very fixable actually in his mind. And it was all based off accountability.
That unit was allowed to just run wild and do whatever they wanted to do with zero accountability for years, since I've been there. For whatever reason, the stigma is that you have to go to the east side to go get dog bites.
Are you saying in the GPD, it was kind of understood that if you wanted to get dog bites, you go to where the black people live?
There used to be a saying, you don't go west of Main Street. That's the median.
Like the railroad tracks.
Yeah, exactly. You're not looking for crime. You're looking for someone that you can victimize and go put in the hospital and glorify.
What would you say is the crux of your story when it comes to your experience with the Gainesville Police Department?
It's not policing as a whole. It's not the majority of the officers. It's these little subcultures within the department. They're usually like a K-9 unit or like a specialty unit. You float under the radar.
Do you think there's a problem in the Gainesville Police Department with racist handlers of police dogs?
Absolutely. It's a huge problem. That's part of why you see the disproportionate numbers.
It shouldn't take someone losing his eye for that accountability to come up. Like this dog and this K-9 unit, the community had complained about several times. A couple of people that we spoke to in Gainesville in the community had told us that the K-9 unit had always been a tool for terrorizing the community. That, you know, even Terrell said in the piece, you know, that's just Gainesville. Like if they bring the dogs out, they're gonna give them a bite. Like it shouldn't take someone losing his eye for the department to be held accountable. Like we should be having these conversations all the time, not just when someone dies at the hands of a police officer.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you all's piece has some type of impact. It was really great. Thank you for
I got
coming
a question
on.
for you.
Oh, for me, sure.
After watching the piece, do you think K-9 units should be disbanded?
I think they make sense, quote unquote, for sniffing out drugs, things that we can't do, things that humans can't do. Sniffing out drugs maybe be the only thing, but I don't think that they should be used in place of a baton or I don't think any of that should be used in policing.
It's also a particularly dangerous weapon because it's not targeted, right? Like in terms of when you use a baton or when you pull the trigger of a gun, it's very clear who's pulling that trigger, who's using the baton. But, you know, they say never work with animals or kids, right? This is a police department using vicious animals in a very unpredictable manner. And, you know, they said, well, the dog shouldn't have gone for the eye, but dogs are unpredictable. And it's like, if you can't use a dog in a predictable way, then you shouldn't be using that dog at all. It's like sort of blindfolding them and using a gun. Like, you should be able to know what the dog is gonna do.
Thank you three for joining me. Elza, Alex, Gabby for doing the reporting, and let's keep on keeping on.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.